And at some point in that conversation, Sam Altman said, how long is it going to be until we have a one-person unicorn? And that's $1 billion company.
Yeah.
And so my feeling is that if he's asking the question, you've got to know that behind the scenes, either he or other tech bros are working to make that happen. Mm-hmm. And so I believe.
Hello, welcome back to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am Trent, your human capitalist, and I feel a little bit like a fanboy today. I have got someone that I've been following, and every time he gets on the mic, I feel like his personal amen corner going, yes, yes, yes. So, Torin, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're on.
So I get to say what's popping. I love being here. I got to tell you, I want everyone to hear how much I appreciate and respect what it is that you are doing. I love the fact that you are willing to deliver that truth serum to individuals, whether it's a prescription that they need or don't know that they need, you deliver it. And I appreciate that. So let's rock and roll. Let's have a good conversation.
Awesome. Well, I am not going to butcher your story because it is such a fantastic story. So for anyone who has been under a rock and don't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Let's see. Joined the United States Air Force straight out of high school. Didn't feel like continuing my education after spending some time there. Struggled to really get my footing in Texas and moved to DC in 1993, started working for MCI Communications from 93 to 98, built one of the most impressive sales teams, most tenured, most effective inside of the organization. And it was a matter of me hiring my own people because I was frustrated with the type of people that HR and others were giving to me. And so I felt like I could do a better job. Knew nothing, Trent, about recruiting, just said, I can go to restaurants, I can go to retailers, I can go to stores in the Baltimore area, and I can find my own people. And that's exactly what I did. When I walked away from MCI in 1998, I started a recruiting firm. I've always been external, did that from 98 to 2010. And it was in 2011 when I lost a multi-million-dollar deal that I committed to doing D&I work. And so I've been in this space unwavering, unapologetic since 2011, when that woman caused me an opportunity that was worth millions of dollars.
I love that. And, listening to your story, your genesis, it is so much like mine. Because, I was sharing with you in the green room, I hated working with my HR people. In fact, people that worked with me prior to me being in HR, whenever they see my title or whatever, I've had a couple that'll actually send me something on LinkedIn and go, the idea of you who spent a lot of time in HR for violating policies is now the one making the policies. They're like, that is just a mind bend. But it's kind of the reason for this podcast because, I define HR as being in charge of the largest expense and the largest revenue producing asset in the company. And so every decision that I make goes through that lens. And I want to bring people to the mic that have that same type of mindset of going, I don't even like HR. I see it as human capital. It's what makes the company money, and it's also the biggest exposure. So kind of with that in mind, you've got a fantastic view across industries. If you're looking at the world of human capital, what do you see changing over the next 1 to 5 years?
Well, first of all, let me just step back and respond to something that you just said. Listen, it's not that we hate HR. Right. It's just that I've always operated with an understanding that HR and TA are not the same. And it doesn't suggest that you can't do both, but most people are not good at both. And so you have to respect the lane that you are in. I am not a policy and procedure person. I know how to follow them. I understand how to review them, and we simply work to make changes to them. But policy and procedure, administrative responsibility is different than Boolean search strings and having conversations that change people's lives. That's a very, very different discipline, if you will. So it's not that we hate HR. It's just that I have a huge respect for people in their swim lane. So that's the first thing that I want to say. When you
Gotcha.
talk about how is HR changing, that really is it. That it's a continued evolution, and I believe if we are honest with ourselves, I don't think that in large part HR has done a good enough job of protecting the stakeholder. I think
Agreed.
HR has focused more on protecting the shareholder. And I'd like to see, and I actually believe that the market is going to demand you do a better job of protecting us, the people
Mm-hmm.
of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Think that
You know,
they are
and
going to continue, Trent, to deliver a degree of tension,
mhm,
professional aggravation. I believe that people are going to demand, give me something more. And that's not always negative. It may be a benefit schedule that's a bit more a la carte, a bit more
mhm,
personalized, rather than forcing me to pick from these two or three options, if you will. It's going to be challenging HR to act on accusations, comments, things that are happening in terms of microaggressive behavior, toxic behavior, broken confidentiality, that HR show up and show that they care about the people. That's the evolution that I see
I love
happening
that.
in HR.
And it's funny you talk about the employee experience, and I went on. If you ever want to get on a rabbit hole, look at Reddit for HR is not your friend. And what you just said, it is like thousands upon thousands of people going, I confided in HR, and they use it as a way to terminate me. And
Absolutely.
and I do think that HR, when practiced wrong, does not see one of their core responsibilities is to be the voice of the employee.
That's
And
right.
sometimes that voice is a very hard one to represent whenever you're going to executive leadership and an advisory standpoint. I mean, I'm very lucky. My CEO usually comes and says, "Hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. How do you think employees are going to respond?" And he wants me to be absolutely brutally honest, and I think that's where I want human capital to go. Is we are advisors, but we represent, we protect, and we develop the employee base. So love that answer. What about AI trends? What are some of the ones that you're watching closely, and why?
So as it relates to AI, first and foremost, I'm watching the pervasive rate in which it is moving. And
Mm,
so we did a report reducing bias in HR using artificial intelligence, did it in collaboration with Plum and with Aptitude Research. And what I will tell you is that I am afraid, Trent, I am honestly afraid that once again, we as organizations are not doing enough to protect our people. Let me just put a caveat around this. What
hmm.
I'm about to say is not HR's responsibility, but they
Okay.
have complicitness in such. They do have a role in this. Here it
Hmm.
is. In January of 2023, Sam Altman was on a podcast with my guy who runs Reddit. I can't founded Reddit. I can't remember his name right now.
Hmm.
And at some point in that conversation, Sam Altman said, "How long is it going to be until we have a one person unicorn?" And that's $1 billion company.
Yeah.
And so my feeling is that if he's asking the question, you got to know that behind the scenes,
He's
either
got some
he
data.
or other tech bros are working to make that happen. And
Hmm.
so I believe if we hit that marker, that there is a one person $1 billion organization, every other executive in the world is going to say, wait a minute, why do we have 200,000 people on headcount? Why do
Right.
we have 50,000 people in headcount? Klarna just proved it.
Oh
They
yeah.
let go
Yeah, I
of
wrote about
X
that.
number of people and they said they're not replacing them because AI is going to be able to do the job. And
Hmm.
so I don't believe that we are having a good enough, honest conversation around the impact that AI is going to have on the workforce, being present. And I don't care how you categorize work: full time, contractual, freelance, compartmentalized, agile, remote. It doesn't matter to me how you categorize the work that is being done. I
Hmm.
believe AI is going to have a bigger impact than we are acknowledging. And that's dangerous for those of us who we have to take care of families and
Yeah.
personal income and all of that. And so I just don't know if we're having a good enough conversation. So Trent, we could talk about the advancement of technology. We could talk about the beautiful bells and whistles, because all of that it's alluring, it's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I want to be able to look to my left and to my right and across the street and not see that homes are abandoned or
Right.
being overrun because people have no income.
Mm. And it's funny because everybody talks about how AI is going to create 92 million jobs, but
Sure.
it's also going to release or make null and void 89 million. And just looking at that, you're kind of basic math. You're like, oh, that's just 3 million people, but you really need to unpack that. 89 million people's job will no longer be around. So that's 89 million coming out looking for jobs. And then you've got 92 million jobs for people who we don't have enough qualified people to go and occupy those. We're going to so how do we take that 89 million and get them ready? And to your point, companies are not having that conversation. And I was on at a conference speaking about AI and culture and all of that. And I don't think I made a lot of friends in the room whenever I said, if you are in HR, especially in leadership, and you are not having the very hard conversations about this is what your job will look like in the future, Mr. and Miss Employee, then you're committing malpractice.
You
You
are
don't need to be
committing
in the job.
malpractice. You are.
Yeah.
But here's the positive side. I appreciate there are the numbers and the reports that say what AI is going to do in terms of new job creation, new categories, new roles and disciplines that
Mm-hmm.
don't exist today. I get it. And so when you ask the question, well, what can AI do? I believe that AI, and we talked about this in the report, I believe that AI can be leveraged in organizations to create more personalized learning and development paths.
Mm-hmm.
If in fact we take the position that we will, and this is for argument's sake, if in fact we take the position that we're going to do away with D&I, that we want to go to this merit-based approach,
Mm-hmm.
as my good friend Andrew Godomsky would say, well, then first we have to have a uniform taxonomy for jobs, not
Right.
requisitions, but a taxonomy of each and every role inside of said organization. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe if we do that, we can then use artificial intelligence to create a learning and development scenario, options, pathway for every single person. So that
Mm-hmm.
when Torin walks in, given his experience and what he brings to the equation, there is an opportunity for him to say, if I want to get here, let me use artificial intelligence, let me use some training, let me use some certifications, let me use some on-demand video, a bit of conference and event and seminar and summit. Let me curate what my learning experience needs to look like and to be, so that I am personally fulfilled, I'm professionally prepared, and I'm able to accelerate into the organization. So I do
Mm.
believe that the presence of AI can be promising, it can be beautiful, but we need to have some different conversation.
And this is for my CEO. I did not tell Torin what we're building, but what you described is exactly one of the internal projects that I'm trying to lead at Hetrix AI. Is we're going to call it the career hacker, and so it's going to sit on top, and it's going to have a connection to our curated development. It's going to have a connection to our rubric, because I'm like you. Don't tell me that you need a senior data engineer and there's 14 different flavors of it. Let's have something, like the tech stacks can be different, but how we grade someone on a senior, the competencies, the scope, the abilities,
That's
all of
right.
that should be uniform. And so once we have that data set, then you've got the 101s and the career development action plans that are most likely sitting in Google Drive or Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. We want to kind of pull that up. So when, to your point, when an employee goes and says, all right, career hacker, I don't know what I want to do. Well, cool. Well, here's everything that you can do in an organization. What career path sounds the best for you? And we already have their information in the HRS and the ATS of what their skills are. quick gap analysis, goes and says, here's a career development plan, tags the manager saying, hey, Torin just did a career development plan. I'll give you updates. Like, there's so much I think that can be done. And that's something that we're working on internally, and I am just jazzed about it.
And you should be. And let me say that I believe personally, and I have no insight into the organization. I don't know how many individuals this is going to impact. I don't know what the timeline is for rolling such out. But here's a prediction, and I want you to mark it down on your calendar.
Got
Given 6 months from the day that you all roll this out and you all have a decent degree of adoption, I believe that engagement, productivity, and trust is
Yep.
going to rise in your organization. Mark that same number 6 months later, 1 year after rollout. I believe that you all are going to have even more adoption. And if you were to put a trust barometer inside of the organization, people will feel like they have more connectedness because of what you all are doing. And that's just one component. That had
Right.
nothing to do with benefits, had nothing to do with philanthropic efforts, had nothing to do with just other areas of the business. Just the learning and development piece, the career hacker piece is going to accelerate the trust mechanism calibration inside of the organization. So I'm going to be watching that.
Hey, I'll show it off to you when we finally get an MVP out there. I'll let you be part of the show.
Thank you.
So my passion is data. I am a big quote guy, and I love William Dennings, and God we trust, and everybody else must bring data.
How about that?
So one of the things that I was just absolutely just diving into, because I'm a huge fan of you, also a huge fan and a client of Plum. So whenever two great organizations get together, I'm like, oh, this has got my attention. So I will put a link to the report in the show notes, so that way anybody can go and read it for themselves. But let's just kind of dig into the report because it had some fantastic insights in it. But before we do that, like, can you walk us through the research methodology? Like, how did you select the focus group and the interviews, and like, what criteria did you use to make sure that you were getting a diverse range of perspectives?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I will say to anyone out there, there's a reason why we approached reducing bias in HR using artificial intelligence from a promising angle. There's a number of research, academic reports, sightings that really talk about the problematic aspects of AI. The lack of representation, ethicalness is missing. Data sets are dirty. Let me just keep it really simple. So many negative stories. I didn't want to approach it from a negative angle, Trent, because I didn't need HR continuing to sit on the sideline. One of the things that we talk about in my presentation, Gardner has done this research for the last 5 years, and every single year, they tap into more HR people. The data sets are larger, and every single year, technology concerns are in the top 3. So I needed to approach the report from a positive angle because I want to draw HR people in so that they would read it and then they would act and perform differently in their organization. When we
Love
talk
that.
about the data set, Madeline and her team over at Aptitude Research, she ran the digital data collection, if you will, and we looked at, I want to say it was 18% small to mid-sized businesses, 22%, 18% small businesses, 22% mid-sized businesses, and 32% of the respondents were enterprise organizations, 10,000 employees or more. Focus groups. I put some messaging out on LinkedIn because I wanted to make sure that we had some, they could be friends, first level connections, but they could have also been second level connections. I just wanted to get some people in a room so that we could have some honest conversation and dialogue like you and I are doing right now. When you ask people survey questions, you don't really get context. Sometimes there's data missing, or there's reason behind the data that we can't get to just by merely asking a top level question. So we held 2 focus groups because we knew that would add a little context. Same questions, but we were able to go 2-3 layers deeper. And I'll give you an example in a moment in where that really played a role. So it was really a mix of individuals, both digital, vocal, on video. And I really, really appreciated the back and forth and our really being able to understand why people are making some of the decisions that they made. And one of the biggest revelations in our work, Trent, and I'll land the plane here, but one of the biggest revelations is we don't really believe AI can help reduce bias. In fact, we actually think that is going to increase and perpetuate bias, which is the reason why we're going to do the report in Q4 and see how things have changed 1 year later.
So, so how do we get around that though? Like, I mean, if all data is pointing to bias is going to increase, if I'm an HR practitioner, what do I need to start doing now to get ahead of that?
Yeah, so I think it would be prudent if we had a very, very tight focus on human-centered AI, AI that is ethical, that it is technically proficient, like it really needs to be in the marketplace, that it is beneficial to society. You know, our doing things just for the sake of doing them is not necessarily going to lead us to where we really want to be. But if we are developing solutions similar to the solution that you all are building inside, similar to Noma that I am trying to build on my side, if we are building solutions that are ethical, that are transparent, that are technically proficient, and that are beneficial to society, beneficial to the workplace, I believe that we can slowly move towards a higher degree of confidence that what is in the marketplace, what is being invested in, what is being adopted and used is good for the business. I think right now people have reservations because we really don't know, well, how is this really being used? I know that a device, I don't want to call the name because it'll show up you'll hear it in the background. But if one of these devices, what are they doing when we are asking that device to give us music, to give us recipes, to tell us what the weather is, what's the best direct route to get to one place versus another? What is an organization doing with all of the data that they are collecting? People are asking the very same question inside of the workplace. What is being done with this harvesting of data that is even happening here inside of the organization? And that's why I say awesome as it relates to trust and whatnot, from a learning and development career progression standpoint. But then now that brings corporate comms in. How is corporate comms exercising their ability to communicate with the workplace and explain to them, this is how we're leveraging AI in our organization. This is what's going on with your data. This is what we're doing to make sure such is protected, cleansed, all of those things. So I just feel like we all, Trent, play a role in how we bring this. We can't stop it, but how do we make sure that people are with us as we are moving along and we're not leaving them behind?
So one thing that the report does emphasize is this importance of aligning the AI strategies with DEIB goals. So, like, can you give some practical steps that practitioners can make sure that their AI systems are not only reducing bias, but also actively promoting D&I? And also, too, let's throw a caveat in there. Something I don't think that we talk about enough is that you can actually use AI to detect bias. I know Mark Simpson with Pillar HR, you know, he brought up a couple of case studies where, you know, a report was given and said, hey, this interviewer, you know, we're noticing some inconsistencies, and it is because people with this type of resume he doesn't ask this question to. You might want to look into that. And I don't think that we're looking at exploring that a little bit more. So what guidance would you give practitioners for aligning that AI strategy with the human strategy and the DEI goals?
Well, before I get to the practitioners, first and foremost, it's the people that are making the purchase. They first must find DNI important, and that DNI needs to be a part of the discovery strategy. One of the things that we uncovered in the report is that I believe the number was 27 or 8%. Please don't quote me, and I should know the number, but I don't. But the
It's
number of
27%.
organizations, say it again, Trent.
It is. It's 27% of the companies are using AI to address bias, according to your report.
Which means an overwhelming number of them did not ask questions of the vendor will the solution help us as it relates to these D&I, efforts, activities, goals, whatever the case? They had no questions in related to D&I. They had questions in about cost. They had questions in about the technology. They had questions in about, service level agreements. They had questions in about all of these other things, but they did not include any questions that says, here's where we'd like to go from a D&I perspective. We want to address candidate screens, or we want to address communication consistency. We want to address compensation levels. We want to address learning and development or benefit allocation. No questions related to whether or not that would support them in their D&I efforts. And all of the things that I just said a moment ago are ways that we can do better as it relates to diversity and inclusion. We've got to move away from D&I being race and gender. We've got to adopt, in my opinion, we have to adopt that there are more than 30 dimensions of D&I, that individuals show up in a variety of ways, and that when we are capturing these various dimensions, when I know more about Trent, when I get Trent to trust the organization, reveal some of these other additional and equally as important dimensions, that I then begin to curate a workplace that is better for him, that he is more engaged, that he will become more productive, and that he will retain or remain within the organization. So I believe that if we are using AI in a way that is productive, we'll look at compensation, we'll look at screening, we'll look at where people are dropping off in the process. We'll look at what our academic footprint looks like. We'll scope geography and understand workforce opportunity and planning and all of those things. We can use AI in ways that are beneficial both inside the organization as well as outside of the organization. But the key is that we have to apply AI at every single value point and explore whether or not it can do what we want it to do. And if it can't do it at that value point, then don't make the investment. Look someplace else in the journey. Look someplace else in the value point equation and determine where AI needs to be inserted and or not.
No, I love that. And one of the things that kind of a passion project that I'm working on as a result of some of the questions is like, where do we put AI is kind of walking through what you said. I call it the employee journey. And I include candidate in that employee journey, because if you're doing it right, the employee experience starts at that first hello. So just kind of finding out that value chain and where do you want to place AI. I may get with you and just kind of say, okay, here's where we want to place it, but like, what are some of the things that we need to consider whenever it comes to DEI? So I'll definitely ping you on that one.
And Trent, if I could, Trent, real quick, I'll just say this to you. I believe that there are three personas. There's the prospect, there's the applicant, and there's the candidate. And so I think that we do ourselves even more justice when we distinctly approach each persona. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be 30 pages for each of them.
Right.
It might be 3 steps here, might be 10 there. But my point is, let's not ignore the different personas as they move through that journey up into the onboarding stage. And then even, Trent, that we take and consider having an onboarding that's not 30 days. I think onboarding should be 6 months. I think that we really should look at how we are really enrolling a person in the organization. And then to your point, how does AI make all of that better?
Right. And it's funny because, you were talking about just the different levels of individuals. So outside looking in, people go, oh, white male. Well, I'm part of LGBTQI. And I was hanging out with a friend. We were at a conference and they were introducing me to another group of people who all look like me. And they all started talking about sports. And, I'm just not a sports person. And they were talking about hunting, or I had nothing in common with them. So I was very quiet. And I remember we walked away and she said, that is the quietest I've ever seen you in a group. I said, I had nothing to connect with. And to me, at the heart of DEI, that is what it is. How do you get your employees to connect authentically and find their place? And it's good business sense. If you are producing a product or a service, the more variety of thought you have around the table trying to solve that problem for your client, the more apt you are to be able to actually get that product or service sold. And so, there's a lot of noise around DEI. I mean, I'm affected, you're affected. It is a conversation that is very disheartening, but I think that if we kind of get past the noise and just stay the course on making sure that we provide a good, safe, authentic environment for every employee, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, what they believe, I think we'll be okay.
We definitely will. And again, right now, what we're experiencing is something called flooding the zone. It's not one of my phrases. I don't know who coined it, but they are just bombarding us with things to distract us, to get us riled up, to get us off of our square. And what I
Mm,
want people to understand is that diversity and inclusion, or any acronym or form of the acronym, if you do it right, it has always focused on the entire tent. How do we
mm,
enlarge the tent so that more people are included? I often had
yeah,
friends say, well, Torin, why are you so concerned about white men being included? Because that is what the word inclusion means.
right.
That's
It's
what
not
it
an us
means.
and them, it's a
That's what
we.
it means. It means all. It means
Yeah.
everyone. It means humanity. And so when you have
Hmm.
people that are ardent, that are unapologetic and unwavering like myself, I feel like you should be embracing those individuals, gravitating towards those individuals so that they can
Hmm.
help you build more robust, beautiful, promising environments.
I love it. I love it. And there's a lot of companies that are taking down their DEI statement and all of that. And and I've have friends that are kind of asking, well, how do you feel about that? And I said, I've kind of had a love hate relationship with DEI statements. Um, I see the need for it. I said, but to me, it is so much more impressive whenever DEI is part of the core values of an organization versus a statement that they put on their website,
Indeed.
because that's where it's going to take root, or
Indeed.
at least that's been my experience. Throw something on the website, people are kind of half-hearted at it, but when it's part of your core value of just your DNA in your company, then yeah, let the government do whatever they want to. We're gonna do who we are and how we do it.
Absolutely. And I firmly agree with you on that. It most certainly is the activity and the action. And we can feel that in your ethos.
Mm,
It doesn't take being there for years to determine whether or not an organization truly has this built into their ethos. And so I agree with you 1,000%.
yeah, and can we? Well, I was going to say something. I was like, Lord, no, we're doing good. I don't need people trolling me on this damn video. But I've got another statement I'll just say to me and you in the green room. So why
All
don't we
right.
move
All right.
into rapid fires? I want to pick your brain on a couple of things. So what's a book that changed your perspective on either HR or business or people?
The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. It reshaped
Okay.
my feeling around pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It really talks about the systems and the structure of racism inside of America's government. And I
Hmm.
recommend that book, Trent, because it's written by a Jewish man. It's not a black man, African American man. It's not a Hispanic, Latina man, if you will, but a Jewish man. And he
Hmm.
clearly articulates the systematic embedding of racism and that we must look at such a little bit differently.
I definitely have to check that. I've never heard of that. I'll have to check it out. Do you have a favorite podcast or series that's kind of like your go-to?
Absolutely. The CEO Diary.
Oh,
I
I love
really
him.
love the CEO Diary, the people that he gets on, some of which are controversial. But he gets some really smart individuals on, and they really have some conversations that I can absolutely, just find myself rabbit holing on, whether I'm on a
Mm.
plane, whether I'm just sitting in the backyard on the deck smoking a cigar. I love the CEO Diary.
Yeah, he had one on not too long ago because a lot of people think I'm an extrovert, but I'm actually an introvert. But I can turn it on, turn it off. And he had a psychologist on, and she was saying that there's actually I can't remember ambivert or omnivert or something, but there's something that really kind of describes. I just felt like I was a weirdo, but I've felt like that all of my life. But
It
like he
was
was
you.
able to really just kind of draw it out of her, and I was like,
Yes.
oh wow, that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes.
Around small group of friends that I'm fairly close to, I am very extroverted. A room
Indeed.
full of people I don't know, I'm very much an introvert unless I'm on stage, but then
Yes.
I'm in control, so I can be an extrovert. So
Indeed.
yeah, some of his people that he gets on, I'm like, God, you have probably forgotten more knowledge than I have in my brain right
Absolutely.
now, you know? I love
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Fantastic one. So where can people find and engage with you?
Real simple. I'm at Torin Ellis across all of the digital atmosphere, TORINELLIS. You can find the report at the Plum website. I know you're going to drop the link, but
Yep.
if you feel like Googling it, it's reducing bias in HR using artificial intelligence. Our next report, which we are working on now, Trent, is going to be focused on Gen Z. We're hitting it from a provocative angle because we believe that they are an incredibly important generation. Will have some interesting contribution to the workplace. And quite frankly, I think that we've done them a disservice. So we want to focus on Gen Z. So we got some things
Love
happening.
that. You know, it's funny, JT O'Donnell, I had her on and she had some pretty unique insights about Gen Z and what they're expecting out of the workplace. So it'd be interesting to see if there's some correlation there between the two reports. So what's your, and let me go ahead and do a plug for you. I get to meet you in Las Vegas. I'm going to hunt you down at some point and shake your hand. But Torin is going to be the MC for Transform. So if you are going to Vegas, make sure that you pop by and say hello to him. And with that, I want to give you the mic drop moment. What is one piece of advice or something that you just want to leave the audience with?
There are no binaries in emotion, culture, and identities. One should never ever remain silent for fear of complexity. There are no binaries in emotion, culture, or our identity. And as a result of that, one should never, ever, Trent, one should never, ever remain silent for fear of complexity. Said by Elif Shafak. She's a Turkish author and essayist. And it is so prudent in the time that we are in that in
Yeah.
the face of all that is happening, one never remains silent for fear of complexity.
Man, you gave me chill bumps on that one. I love that. I expected nothing less. I don't know why I'm surprised, but thank you for coming on. I could probably talk to you for another hour, but I know both of us have got a hard stop. So I will see you soon in Vegas at Transform.
My man, thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Human Capitalist. This channel is all about community, so comment, subscribe, and join the conversation. This is Trent Cotton, your human capitalist, signing off. Remember, invest in yourself, own your potential, and keep building your own human capital. I'll see you next time.